everyone. There was the cute one, the smart one, the quiet one, and the funny one. I'm talking about the Beatles, of course, who were also known as the Fab Four. But did you know that when the Beatles first formed as a band, there were 5 members? Today I'm going to discuss their early years, Beatlemania, and life after the Beatles. The most famous lineup of the Beatles was John Lennon, the smart one, Paul McCartney, the cute one, George Harrison, the quiet one, and Ringo Starr, the funny one. But at one time there was also Stu Sutcliffe and Pete Best. It all started in 1957 when John Lennon is introduced to Paul McCartney while playing with his band, the Quarrymen. In 1958, John and Paul meet George, and they ask George Harrison to join their band also. In 1960, Stu and Pete joined the band, and they changed their name officially from the Quarrymen to the Beatles. Later that year, Stu decides he wants to stay with his girlfriend and leaves the band. In 1962, Stu passes away at a young age of 21 from a brain hemorrhage. Ringo joins the band, and then Pete leaves. John gets married to Cynthia. John then marries Cynthia. In 1963, Beatlemania officially begins. The name Beatlemania started in '63 after the Fab Four toured Britain and had 4 singles and 2 back-to-back albums. But it wasn't until '64 when the Beatles would make their permanent mark on the United States. Tim Hill states in his book entitled John, Paul, George, and Ringo, it wasn't until 1964 that John, Paul, George, and Ringo rocked the planet to its core and changed the course of popular music. Their path began almost 10 years earlier, but there was a number of changes before the all-conquering 4-piece lineup was formed. In 1964, the Beatles finally arrived to the United States and have thousands of screaming fans waiting for them. 2 days later, they perform on The Ed Sullivan Show in front of an audience of over 73 million fans. Their first movie was also released that year, called A Hard Day's Night. In 1965, Ringo gets married to Maureen Cox, and the Beatles leave for the Bahamas to take their second movie entitled Help. In 1966, George gets married to Patty Ann Boyd, and John makes his very famous comment to a magazine called Datebook that the Beatles are greater than God. A couple days later, he has to hold a press conference, and apologizes for his ridiculous remarks. At the end of 1966, the Beatles start their final U.S. tour. In 1967, they have their first global TV lineup when they perform their hit song, All You Need Is Love, watched by over 400 million people. Ringo and his wife also have their second child this year. In 1968, John makes his first public appearance with Yoko Ono, and wife Cynthia files for divorce because of adultery with Yoko. Their animated movie Yellow Submarine is also released this year. 1969 marked their last live performance in London. Paul got married to Linda Eastman, and a couple of days later, John married Yoko Ono, and then began their 7-day in bed for peace, where they stayed in bed in a hotel room for 7 days to promote anti-violence and war. Later that year, John leaves the Beatles, which marked the end of a fabulous run with all 4 members. Life after Beatles and Beatlemania consisted of all 4 members going out on their own. On December 8, 1980, John was tragically killed outside of his home, which shocked the world. A couple of days later, Yoko Ono set up a 10-minute of silence for his fans to remember him. In New York Central Park alone, over 100,000 fans showed up for this event. In November of 2001, George Harrison died of cancer at the age of 58. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2003. Paul McCartney was knighted in 1997, which officially changed his name to Sir Paul McCartney. He has had a very successful solo career and still continues to make music. Ringo Starr also has had a successful solo career and is still making music. Marie Clayton states in her book, The Beatles, Unseen Archives, 40 years on Beatles music remains as fresh, vibrant, and innovative as the day it was pressed. A peerless legacy for existing fans to revisit and new ones to discover. Let me conclude by saying, The Beatles' success was unlike any other band, and it would be hard for anyone to top their success. Thank you.